Life comes with its own set of dilemmas. Every decision we make, every choice we make actually determines our destiny. People often think that their destiny has already been chosen for them. Yet I want you to know that the choices you have made by being here in this classroom, by setting your course, is one of the most amazing things that you will ever do. Yet with that, you have created some dilemmas in your life. Often, what happens is people blame other people for the crossroads and the dilemmas in their lives. Yet the truth is, most of the time, it's based on our choices. It's based on our decisions, the things that we have decided to do. And what I'd like to do is place some context in it. Let me show you what happens. In 1845, a guy by the name of Stephen Perry saw a need in his office, and that was that papers were flying everywhere, and he needed something to band those papers together. Some years before that, 1839, 6 years prior to that, Goodyear had gone to the patent department and patented tires. And he saw something that he could create that we now call the rubber band. At that point, he tied a knot in it, yet later it became something that was banded together. And what he used that rubber band is for banding things together. In doing that, he solved a problem. And here's what we've done today. The purpose of a rubber band is to stretch itself so it can wrap around things. What we've done today is called the stretch stress, and it's created other dilemmas in our lives. I want you to know every human being is designed to stretch. In fulfilling the purpose of your life, the mission of your life, the calling of your life, if you would like to call it that, is to involve stretching in your life, is to involve that. And for you and I to see the stretch as a growth and fulfillment of who we are, we have to redefine what we now call stress. And we need to call it, I'm in a stretching moment. Now, let me see if I can introduce you to two fellas that you already know. You already know them, Orville and Wilbur Wright. Orville and Wilbur Wright. In the late 1800s, they were having lunch one day. And while they were having lunch, one of the brothers was watching some birds fly, and he leaned over to his brother and he said, "Do you think that human beings could fly?" The one brother said, "No way, it can't happen." And they actually went as far as saying, if God wanted us to fly, he would have equipped us with wings. Yet the one brother just couldn't get away from it. He knew there was gliders, then they were self-propelled. He wanted to know if a human being could pilot what later would be called an airplane. In that work, it took them 3 years. It took them 3 years to begin the work. And what happened is several years later, they lifted off the ground. They flew a total of 18 inches, less than a football field, and at Kitty Hawk, and it was renamed Kitty Hawk after the town that was some miles away. And then by the end of the day, they flew about 36 inches off the ground, and then they flew about 10 feet off the ground, and they flew the distance of the width of 3 wingspans of a 747. Imagine this. Yet in doing that, they created some situations, just like there's situations in your life and my life of money, of deadlines, of how am I going to make my social impact? What's going to be my social impact in life? And every one of those quests is a proper quest. It's a proper place to be. Yet it's created some other situations. And because we don't see it as stretching and we call it stress, we kind of freak ourselves out, don't we? We create other situations. And yet here's what we need to realize. What the Wright brothers learned, and is virtually the same principle today. You have to overcome. There's 4 things in getting flight that you have to overcome. The first one is the weight of the plane. For you and I, it's the weight of our choices, the weight of our decisions to have a social impact, to gain money in our lives and face and accomplish and overcome all the deadlines that's in our lives. We have to overcome the weight. How do we overcome the weight? We have to create some thrust in our lives, which means we have to change the use of our minutes into momentum towards where we want to go. Now, let me show you a problem. Let me show you the problem. The third aspect of flight, okay? And for you and I to gain flight in our lives, we have to overcome this. And that's what's called drag. That's the pushback. That's the anxiety of moving forward from one space into another. It creates drag. We get pushback from people. Now, once you and I balance, once flight, an airplane balances weight with thrust and compensates for the drag, we get a magical thing that happens. It's called lift. It's called lift. And in actuality, what happens is a plane is actually held up because these three forces are put together. In your life and in my life, for us to move forward, we have to do 5 things. The first thing is we have to redefine the stretch in our lives and call it stretch rather than stress. We have to walk away from calling things stressful, because when it's stressful, we want to run from it. When the deadline, the stress of deadlines, the stress of a lack of money and having to manage my money, and the stress of my social impact, I call it stress, I want to run from it. But if I call it stretching, then what I do is I embrace the calling of my life. I embrace the positioning of my life, and I get new ideas. Now, in doing that, when I say get those new ideas, the 4 other things come into play. For me to get some flight, for me to get some elevation, for me to elevate my life in these deadlines, in this social impact, in money, what I have to do is I have to overcome the weight of this stretching. I do that through thrust, and it creates other problems called drag. Now, once I balance those 3 things, a 4th thing happens, and lift happens. I'm here to suggest to each and every one of us that's in this classroom that once you redefine, number 1, redefine the stress into stretch and allow your life to fulfill what it's supposed to be, its own DNA. You are designed naturally to accomplish certain things. Find that space and get in that. And you'll watch what happens in just a moment. Once you find that, you get lift. You get lift. Now you have to overcome the weight with some thrust. Thrust is managing your task and moving forward, and it's going to create other problems. That's called drag. Once you balance those 3 things, you get lift. And here's what's going to happen. You're going to find your sweet spot. And as you gain education in those classes, as you overcompensate with some thrust to get overcompensate and compensate for the weight, it's going to create some drag. Then all of a sudden you get lift. And I'm here to tell you that later on, as you invest now, you invest your minutes now, you're going to have plenty of money. You're going to enjoy deadlines, and you're going to make a social impact. Listen, I'm Matt, and I'm your friend. And you can reach me at LEAP, L-E-A-P, at mattupton.net, or you can call or text me anytime at 916-708-8103. Listen, if nobody's communicated to you today that they believe you can make it, I believe you can. All you've got to do is get on the runway and keep going, okay? Do not give up. Keep pressing forward. Redefine those things that you're now calling stress, as stretching moments that will reveal to you what your real calling is. And then overcompensate the weight with thrust and embrace the drag. And once you get those 3 things in balance, bam, the magical thing of lift happens. I can't wait to see you. I believe in you. I'll see you later.